Bom dia. Welcome. We are so glad you're here. Let's get into the A to Z guide for navigating the Portuguese real estate market. Navigating the real estate market in a new country presents unique challenges, whether purchasing or renting, and particularly when accustomed to the practices in the USA and Canada. In Portugal, the property market can resemble the Wild West, creating uncertainty as various players vie for personal advantages. Understanding the roles of buyers and sellers agents is critical, emphasizing the need to work with an agent not acting as a dual agent, contrary to local advice. Without an MLS system, finding properties relies on collaborative efforts with a trustworthy and diligent agent team. Choosing one trusted agent or office is recommended for a more personalized experience. The upcoming seminar program reflects the team's ongoing commitment to advancing the Portuguese real estate industry. Challenges in valuing properties without a reliable system leads to inflated prices, impacting both locals and foreign buyers. Navigating negotiations becomes essential, especially given the speculative nature of properties owned by global families. A diligent team aids buyers by showcasing multiple properties, assisting in negotiations, and ensuring fair deals. Legal considerations, including a comprehensive checklist, are paramount for transparency and legality. Lawyers, surveyors, and mortgage specialists play crucial roles in providing a smooth and secure experience for property buyers. In a seemingly Wild West market, relying on a knowledgeable and ethical team is essential for a successful real estate journey in Portugal. Come on, let's introduce you to our trusted team. It'll be fun.
I want to welcome everybody to this discussion on real estate in Portugal. As a reminder, it'll be fun. It's viewer supported, which I think everybody knows. These discussions are put together in order to help us all learn and grow. We get better at it each time and we learn more. Each one of us does. Your financial support in Patreon is greatly appreciated. It's also appreciated when you use any of our vendor affiliates that we use and recommend on our vendor list. They're all pre-vetted. It's not like we just run around out there and rubber stamp random people. Today we have with us Claudia Ribeiro and Susanna Pestana. What I wanted to get it kicked off and talk about real estate real quick, from the majority of the people are from the United States, and we are used to a very structured real estate world. And from a realtor perspective, we have a National Realtors Association, and there's a ton of education that goes behind that, and lots of rules and regulations. And one of them that they focus on is buyer's agents and seller's agents. And one of the things that's not done in Europe, and obviously Portugal specifically, is the distinction between a buyer's agent and a seller's agent. So many people will come to here on the island or someplace in Portugal and start shopping and be told, well, you have to call and contact each one of those real estate companies in order to get to see a property. That is not true, not with these guys. This is why we use and we recommend them. They will make the arrangements. They will share the commissions. And the reason that they don't like to do it here or have not traditionally done it here is they want both sides. They want the buyer listing and the seller listing. By having both of those listings, they now get all of the commissions, which is lovely. But that means they're not acting for you. They're not acting in your best interest. It also means nobody's there for the seller and acting in their best interest and helping negotiating. Nobody's there for the buyer and making sure all the due diligence, everything's legal, negotiations, they're getting their best price. It just overall works better when you have a very specific one person that you're working with and you allow them to set up all of your showings and everything you'd like to see. Okay. You're going to find that works out much better for you in the long run. So that is just simply my speech on, not working with someone that's doing a dual agency. And if they, they need to be very clear if they are, so that you understand that your best interest may not be taken to heart. Okay. So the next thing that I want to speak to before I then go into let these guys run with it is property searches and MLSs. One of the things that we have in the United States is an MLS. That MLS system is a multiple listing service. And what that allows is all of the real estate agents and companies throughout the country, including if you're doing your for sale by owner, you can put your property in the MLS. Therefore, anybody can go into the system that is a legal agent, realtor, and look in there and find a property in California for you from Illinois. I mean, anywhere in the country, they can see all the properties. They also have the ability to see what has sold and provide good comps for an area, meaning comparisons. So you're getting a good price, that this is what that style property sells for in that particular community, in that particular neighborhood. Okay. Those are all things that are very fun and difficult here on the island. One of the things that Susanna does, and she does really well, every time I see her in the office, she is in there shopping all of the other websites across the island and throughout Portugal to find properties, to know what's available. If she's not in the office, she's out on the road going and looking at the properties that she thinks one of her customers might be interested in. And she doesn't just do it for herself, she does it for the entire company. Okay, so you cannot go wrong, hence the teamwork that you'll find when you come. They all tend to go around as a team. And, if you see Claudia, you're going to see Susanna. There's also another advantage there in case you happen to be fluent in Spanish. She's fluent in Spanish and English as well as Portuguese. And Claudia, English and Portuguese. And I don't know about her Spanish.
No? I do understand it, but
but you're not fluent. Anyway, so now we're going to you guys. Your team is very serious about the ongoing education, which we had spoken to. It can be fairly limited here in Portugal, and helping to advance the industry as a whole. Can you speak to the upcoming program and seminar that the team is going to, and it's in Porto this time, right?
In Porto, exactly. Mm-hmm. So we have a membership that the company pays a monthly fee. So we have access to several courses. And so at the end of the month, we're going to go, some members of the team are going to go to Porto to continue to maintain ourselves certified. So we're going to do some courses in negotiation, in legal aspects of the real estate business, documentation wise, because there are a few slight changes that are coming into the legislation. And so we need to maintain ourselves updated. So we're going to go for the last week of the month. We'll be going to Porto as a team to get things going.
Yeah, to celebrate my birthday, because it's the last week of the month. But I won't be there.
You won't be in Porto? Okay.
No, I'm going to be in Rome. Anyway, I know. It's going to be fun. It'll be fun, right? So the next part is it's really common to find pricing challenges. And I say this very politely. With no comps in order to guide someone when they're putting something on the market. How do you guys work with your buyers and your sellers in order to either see that a property is put out there at a fair price, or to guide the buyer in helping them to get a fair price based upon that there's no comps?
Although we don't have the MLS system and we don't have comps as you're used to in the States, what we do have is separate programs that we pay for, okay? And they give us a comparison in what was sold in similar area and with a similar typology. So if we're talking about a 3-bedroom, it will compare other 3-bedrooms sold in a radius of 1 kilometer or 3 kilometers, depending on what we put in the search or in the filters, okay? And we can get a rough idea of what's been sold in the last few months or the last year, so that we can get the price more approximate.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then you're doing the same thing in reverse for the buyers to help them, to guide them to put it on the market. One of the things that I wrote up at the top was, and you guys can't see my deck because I'm not sharing it, is I wrote pricing challenge. And the reason I said pricing challenge is you will be surprised as you go. And yes, we all know what happens in the United States, meaning if you put your house on the market and your real estate company that you're working with comes back and says, this is what we think you should list it at, and you decide it's worth, $10,000 more or whatever, then they'll put it out there for you $10,000 more. Does that make sense? Here on the island, you're going to discover that they like to put things out there at a very inflated price, not $10,000. Think much larger. Add a zero in some cases to that. And because they want to see if they can find a buyer for that. And obviously a local Portuguese buyer is not going to fall for that, right? But a buyer from overseas might. So this is where you want to make sure you're working with your team and you trust your team, and you're working with, pick one realtor, whether you pick these guys or not, pick one person and work with them so that they can get to know you and your needs. Okay. That way I'm sorry.
No, continue.
Okay. And did you want to say anything else about that particular subject, or? Okay?
Yes, I wanted just to add that exactly that. The majority of prices at the moment, although us as realtors and real estate agents, we do this comparison in these comps, then we have sellers that actually do want to inflate prices, even though we're telling them that it's worth X, they want to put Z because their neighbor sold at that price. And then what happens in the market is sometimes if you compare price per square meter in a new property and a used property, or a property with 10 or 15 years, they're practically at the same price. And that's what we try to tell our sellers, to get an understanding so that they don't go into this inflated market without.
Right. And so that if you haven't been to the island and looked at properties, so that you understand a new property is going to be very modernistic, and even 20 years old is a big difference here by comparison to the United States. Okay. So those prices really shouldn't match. So the next thing is your company works really hard to ensure legal compliance. And this is one of the things, the due diligence, the checklist that I've seen used in the back office that impressed me. Can you go through some of those things that you're doing and why you do them?
So here the laws are very tight on property purchasing. And so what we always do with our legal team, and we usually have 3 lawyers that we work with them differently, depending on each case. But we have our checklist that we did with them prior. So we have to have, even before we go on the market, we have to make sure that there is a usage license. It's what allows people to live in a property, and that is issued by the town hall. And this is sometimes something that will be lacking in older properties. Okay. Mm-hmm. And so we have to be sure that they exist. And if they don't exist, then, and the client wants to really buy that property because it's at a great price, we have to do a promissory note that protects them and allows for the usage license to be issued before they do the purchase. So there are ways to get around things, but we make sure that our buyers know what they're getting themselves into, so that if they do.
I'm sorry.
No.
It's not uncommon. It's fairly common to find these issues. We don't find them in the United States very often. It's why
They're very common. They're very common because we're talking about 30, 40, 50 years ago. A lot of people would do houses, would add on to the houses without any kind of license. Obviously, the regulations throughout the years made things tighter. And so a lot of these properties didn't have one. But if they're going to sell them now in 2024, they do need to have it. And so they need to make the house up to standard. And there's a lot of requirements. And you find that a lot in the east side of the island, in the north side of the island also. And those are extra places we need to be extra careful.
Then I also want to make another clarification, and that is when they speak to this usage license, and even if they work with legal and you want to move forward, and so they get the usage license put on the property, which can take months, right? A very long process. But once it happens, it is now going to be registered for this year, or at the time that it's done. So that means the whole property will have to follow the building code guidelines for this year. So if it was a property that was done, and that goes back to what, 1952 or?
Anything from 1952, anything above 1951 is exempt.
Okay, so once you get, back far enough, it is exempt from this issue. But if that addition was done in 1972, it's probably not going to be to code, and nor is the rest of the house. So now when the house gets its usage license, you will be required to pay to do all of those updates on that house. Okay? Even though it's been sitting there for years.
Exactly.
Just be aware of that. Then, a lot of them will not make sure that that's really clear. So we're making sure it's really clear. So now I want to go to, what are the roles of legal support, your attorney, and a surveyor? And do I have to have one in order to purchase a property there in Portugal, specifically on the autonomous region of Madeira?
The surveyors is something that is not common practice in Portugal. Okay. However, we do have, because of the necessity from working with a lot of foreign clients, we have now some engineers that can work as surveyors and can help inspect properties. Okay. As for the role of the lawyers, it depends. If you want someone independently, they can analyze, but normally real estate companies, because they have the legal department, will take care of the documents. And then when you go to do the title deed, you can either do the title deed with a lawyer or with a notary. And again, they do the full verification of all documents to check if there's not liens on the property, if you have your usage license and you have everything else up to standard before you can put it in your name.
And can a property be sold here with a lien on it?
It cannot. It has to be clear before it's sold. On the day of the deed, the notary or the lawyer responsible for doing the deed will verify one more time before doing it.
Okay.
And if it's
okay, 60 days ago, they're going to check at the very last minute to make sure nobody put something on it. Because properties here can very easily be owned by, I don't know what, 6, 8, 10, 12 people?
Because of the inheritance, yeah.
You want to explain that real quick?
So what that can happen is, because throughout the years we have a lot of people that immigrated, and so they went out to South Africa, to Venezuela, to a lot of places. And so once they die, then their heirs come in, and then it's their marriage, and then you have 12 people to sell. So that's another thing that has to be verified. When you have a lot of people, you have to verify that exists a power of attorney. They don't all have to be here, but there has to be a power of attorney to allow it to be sold. Because if just one of them doesn't want to sell, it can't be sold. And we've had a situation like that before.
That's fairly common, that properties that are listed that you may find will have that issue. And so that's when Claudia and her team may come back to you and say, this property may not be one that you want to even go and see, because you may not want to fall in love with it and never be able to purchase it, right?
Right.
It's not.
So you try to ask those questions beforehand with other realtors. Not that they all do full disclosure, but some of them are honest enough that will say, we have this legal issue and we have that legal issue, and then
before you even get out there looking at something.
Exactly.
Okay. So now I wanted to have you speak to a mortgage process. And I realize that many of the people that are here on today will be paying cash, and that's fine. However, you do have the ability to do a mortgage here as a first mortgage and a second mortgage, if you can speak to all of that.
Okay. Here it's not as common to do second mortgages, but I'll talk about mortgages in general. Okay. The age limit here in Portugal is the age of 75. Okay, to be able to get a mortgage, or up to the age of 75. So that means that if you're 70, you can only get a 5-year mortgage.
Okay.
And I'm also seeing, I have a few questions also on mortgages that came on the chat, but I'll get to that shortly.
Okay.
And so the mortgage here takes about 45 to 60 days to be approved. Before that, what we need is several documents, tax returns, your credit reports. We request those things, okay? And you have mortgage brokers that take care of that, okay? And they'll ask for all those documents and send them to the banks. And then the banks will say if they need anything else. They normally want bank statements. They want several things. And then they offer here fixed rates or variable rates. And it's very common in Europe to have variable rates. And in Portugal, it's very common. However, now, due to the worldwide crisis, the majority of banks are giving fixed rates. You have 2-year, 3-year, and some even offer the duration of the contract, depending if that's something you want to do or not. Okay.
Yeah, it's not real common that they do a fixed rate like we do, where, 30-year fixed, 15-year fixed.
It's not common. In times of crisis, yes. When the rates were low, that was unthinkable. Now that things are at the moment, we have a fixed rate that is around 4%, 4.5%.
For how many years?
2.
2 years. What does that mean? Because that's 2 years. That happens at the end of 2 years.
What happens in the end of 2 years is that your mortgage will become variable, okay? And that means it will be depending on the Euribor. So if your interest rate is associated to a 3 months, it will vary every 3 months. If it's a 6 months rate, the same. What you can always do is every 2 years, you can free of charge investigate other banks and do a transfer of credit. And that allows you to always get good rates or better rates.
But you have to requalify.
You have to requalify.
Yeah. Okay.
But so it's very common. It's very common here.
Okay.
It's starting to be because people are becoming financially more, they're having more literacy. So they understand finance better.
Okay. So let's talk about, you talked about age limits. How much do you have to put down if you're a foreign buyer?
If you're a foreign buyer, normally, depending on the risk factor, it can be between 20 to 30% of the down payment. Okay. So if the house is 100,000, at least 30,000, between 20 to 30,000, you'll have to put down.
If I lived in the United States and was still there and wanting to buy this as a vacation home, I can do that. I will just have a little higher interest rate. Is that correct?
Correct. When you as a second home, it's here in Portugal, it's always mandatory to put the 20% down. For foreign buyers, it's not going to be much of a difference. But the interest rates can be slightly higher if it's a vacation home than in your primary home.
Okay. Okay. So that we're going to see if we can figure out where my mouse ran off to. It's lost. Oh, there it is. How fun is that? Okay. So here we go. I wanted to ask about taxes and closing costs. These are everybody's favorite subjects. So I've chosen to buy a house. And when I get all done, what am I going to have to pay in closing costs as a percentage or a roundabout number? How much does the lawyer cost me? All of that. And what are the taxes that I have to pay?
The taxes obviously vary, and we have a slight difference than the mainland. Okay, so because we're an island, we have a slight difference in taxes. We call them the EMT. So it's transmission of property tax. So whenever you buy a property, you have to pay EMT, stamp tax, and the deed. If you're a cash buyer, because if it's a mortgage, there are fees associated to that. Okay, right. But if you're a cash buyer, and the EMT will be around, which is the transmission tax, will be between 6 to 8%, depending on how much the purchase is. Okay. Okay. Let me do just a quick, just for you to, just to launch. Let's say the property was 300, let's say 250, and it was considered your main home. This would be around 7%. So between stamp tax and the transmission tax, we're talking around 7,000 euros. If you are buying a 250,000 property, okay? Besides that, you have the deed, and the deed varies depending on where you do it. You can do it at a lawyer, and they have different prices. You can do it at the public notary. It can be anywhere between 375 to 900, depending on where you do it.
Okay.
And these are closing costs: transmission tax, stamp tax, and the deed. If you want, obviously, an independent lawyer, their rates vary depending on what they charge. So I can't exactly precise.
Then what about yearly property tax? Can you give us an example of what that would be on a $250,000 euro property?
Exactly. This will be around between 250 and 400. It'll probably be between 250 and 400 per year. Per year. $14,000 a year I was paying. I know. And there's another thing that's important, because I know for especially American clients, there's a big difference. When you do homeowner insurance, there's also a big difference. You can get very good insurance coverage for about 200, 250 per year. And that's also a big difference compared to what you're used to.
Yes, it is. Okay, so my next one is, I want to talk about long-term rentals, because you guys do them and everybody needs one, or to buy a property, whichever, in order to apply for their visa. So if you can go ahead and speak to a long-term rental, how you go about it, how you get one, how you get set up for a visa, all of the things.
So usually what we do is we're contacted by email from a lot of you. We set up a Zoom call. That's usually how we proceed. So I set up a Zoom call. We have a few questions we like to ask. What you expect? Is walkability important? Do you want to be in Funchal? At the end of the day, what kind of lifestyle you like, okay? But we usually go from the principle that you're first time people here, and you will probably be better off in a place that is more central. So usually the São Martinho area, due to its walkability, nice restaurants, and being very close to the center without being in the center, is always the way to go to start, until you get a feel of the island, get a better understanding of actually where you want to purchase. So São Martinho is usually what we suggest, okay? Although if you have more specific needs, if you have pets, sometimes apartment doesn't work because of the size of the pets. So we have to find homes, and usually in Funchal that's more difficult. So we have clients in Mexico, we have clients in Ponta do Sol. It really depends on each one's needs. So we do several questions. We understand what you want, and then we go on the market to see what's on there. Okay. And there is a high demand for rentals, so they don't stay very long on the market. Okay. And one of the challenges we usually find is that other realtors do not want to work with us when it comes to rentals. Some do, some don't.
Right.
And so we explain that to our clients in the first meeting, so that they understand that sometimes, and not always, it works out the shared commission thing. Okay.
Right.
And the 1 bedroom, 2 bedroom, it varies. But we can find 1 bedrooms, furnished, simple 1 bedrooms in Funchal from 1,000, 1,300, and 2 bedrooms usually start at 1,500.
Okay.
Okay. In Funchal.
And that's for a furnished piece, just to give you
Furnished
an idea.
piece. Although we have done some rentals, especially in December, unfurnished 1,600, and they weren't furnished.
I would like for you to talk about what sets your company apart, and why it is that I and Alan, we work so hard to make sure people know about you.
We do try to understand culture-wise what is needed, and we do make the difference here in our company between the buyer and the seller's agent. Okay. I usually take care of the buyers. Okay. And if for some reason we did have a listing, we avoid the dual situation that Leslie was talking about in the beginning, because here the legislation allows us to be both the seller and the buyer's agent. But we have decided, and we've understood throughout our practice throughout the years, that it doesn't allow us to be impartial. So we separate. So for some reason, if I had a listing, but I also had the buyer, I would send my listing to Susanna or someone else in the team, so that we could separately be able to defend people's interests and people to feel more supported in that.
Perfect. One of the other things that I wanted to have you is speak to it's the simple things that you guys take care of. When you rent a property, you get here, you need help turning on the water, getting
You go to the utilities, we change water, gas, sometimes small things. You need a plumber, you need electrician for A or for B. Sometimes you need a recommendation on a cleaning lady. Sometimes you need us to go with you to the SEF department. The small things that make the difference when you come to a new country and you don't speak the language, which can be challenging. And people have asked us for several things, but usually utilities is what we help them once they arrive. So water, electricity, gas, and that makes it a lot simpler. We also go with them to terminate those contracts when they change rentals or when they buy a property, to clean everything out and make sure that all the bills are updated. To allow people to get their security deposits back. And so we guide them through the process so that people don't get conned, let's say like that.
Yeah, I mean, we went to turn on the water in the little township at our new place, and literally Susanna is meeting people she hasn't seen in years, while we're standing in line. So it's like a party. The water company. So, it's entertaining at all times. The other thing this is going to sound silly, but one of the things that they will do if you need it, if you did your rental through them, and a lot of the rentals they're not going to have proper sheets. I mean, drag a set of sheets with you, but they don't fit the beds here. Our sheets in the United States are not the same size. Our bed mattresses are different. So one of the things that I know that you've done, and not that you don't have to pay for it, this is not a free service by any means, but if you would need help and have a set of sheets there, somebody can run out and grab you a set of sheets. You'll have to pay for it, but that way it's there when you get here.
We've done it before.
Right.
And we've bought pet food.
Litter.
Those small details, because you're coming from a long trip and your pets have been in cages, unfortunately, and those small details make the difference when people are arriving. We try to be the most accommodating we can be. We buy like a survival kit, for when you arrive after your long trip.
Cookies, good stuff. Cookies,
bottle of wine. We
keep all the priorities in order at all times.
It depends on each person's needs, but we're open to it. If you need it, we're very open to that.
Into the questions, and I do have a few questions, and I'm just going to pop through real quick, and then I'm going to have Claudia go through the chat, and we'll open up the floor, and we'll wrap everything up. So the first one that was sent in was from Doug and Shawnee, and they're looking into their D7s, and that obviously requires a 12-month lease agreement. Once it's signed and submitted with the application for the visa, do people stay in Madeira until approval, or do they return to their home country if it takes longer than 90 days? I'm going to go ahead and answer that one. Technically, if you were here on your scouting trip and you made appointments and went with Claudia or someone on the team and chose a rental while you were here, which you can do, then you would take your lease agreement home with you. And when you go for your VFS appointment is when you're going to turn that in. You apply for your visa in your home country, not while you're here in Portugal. So once you apply for that, you are technically supposed to stay in your home country until you've been awarded that visa. Okay. And that's, what you choose to do is of your own choice. But the next question is, what did we do and how did we navigate it? We came here, we shopped, we got an idea on our scouting trip of different areas of the island so that we understood what was available from a rental perspective. We actually only went into C1 to get an idea because there's not a lot of options, but we shopped the areas. Then when it was time or closer to the time, we called Claudia, and she and Susanna actually took us shopping online one morning at 6 a.m. our time, and the three of us watched and we picked one. We saw two of them. We'd had our discussions and we just chose. The next day our contract came over, and then it was filed because your contract has to be filed with the finance department in order to be legal for your visa. Okay, so you can get an unfiled contract here in Portugal. Do you want to speak to that, Claudia?
Yes, you can. And there are people that do it. But whenever you go through our company, we never do contracts that are not filed with the finance department. Okay. So all the receipts come in the finance portal. So, and there's a specific stamp tax that's paid for each rental contract, depending on the amount of the rental fee per month. And that way, all your receipts are legal, and no one can say that you're not legally bound to the contract. So we don't do contracts any other way, but there are companies that will do it. Or if you go in Idealista, you can contact directly an owner. He may not be willing to register the contract because he wants to earn it off books. So you have to be extra careful with those things.
You will keep in mind, if you're an immigrant and you're getting a visa, you need a legally filed contract, period. No matter what somebody tells you. So the next one is, they heard that mortgage payments aren't tax deductible. Is this correct? The answer
yes, it is.
Yes, it is. Surprise, very different. But keep in mind, you're not paying yearly property taxes of $14,000. You're paying $300. Okay, so it will work out just fine. How much does home insurance usually cost, which we spoke to? It's considerably less. It's probably 40 to 60% less, I guess.
Yeah, probably.
If you purchase a home, next question, for a primary residence, but could move in for a while, would you still qualify for a mortgage as a primary residence? It would depend on whether you had a temporary residence card.
Not necessarily. Mortgage-wise, in Portugal, if you do not own any other homes, if this is the only home you own in Portugal, you can nominate it as your primary residence, even if you're not necessarily living here.
Do I have to be a tax resident to do so?
But that you have to, from the moment you say primary residence, you have to keep in mind that you're saying this is the primary place for tax.
So you are literally making this your domicile, and you will pay taxes in this country first. Okay?
Exactly. Yep.
Okay. So how soon do they need to move in order to qualify for a primary residence? It's literally a matter of stating that when you do your mortgage or you make the purchase.
And when you do the deed, because when you do the deed, you have to nominate it as your primary or your secondary, because when you have a secondary residency, you pay a slight bit more of a transmission tax. There's two taxes we talked about closing. So it's a statement that you make. For example, if you were to purchase a property and your main idea was to do it as a vacation home and to rent it out when you're not here, then you would never buy it as a primary home. You'd buy it as a secondary home. Otherwise, you wouldn't be able to register contracts in the finance department. You could have issues, legal issues.
Okay. And then when I buy my home, do I have to have a NIF and a bank account?
Mandatory. NIF, always mandatory. NIF will be like your passport in Portugal. You're going to need it everywhere you go. So the form you get your NIF has to go always around with you in a copy. I usually tell my clients to have it on the Google Drive or something. They're going to need it for everywhere they go. As for the bank account, for the purchase, yes. For the promissory note, no. It can come directly from your American or your foreign bank account. But to purchase, I do recommend it, because on the day of the deed, you should do a bank check. And that's only possible if the funds are in Portugal. It's safer, the transaction.
Okay. Perfect. And so that you'll know, we use Spartan FX in order to bring the funds over here. It's a much cleaner, crisper way of doing it. The link is in our vendor listing, and Spartan is located in London. It's people that you talk to on the phone. It's an amazing service, because you're not just doing it online and hoping and praying that you filled out all the proper paperwork. So it's worth giving them a call if you're in this situation and making a purchase. Next question. If I bought a home and rented it out while I was unable to move, is there companies that can manage the property and collect the rents?
If it's long-term rentals, our company also takes care of that. We do management of long-term rentals. Okay. If it's short-term, we recommend a few companies that are on the market that take care of short-term rentals, because it's a different, they could be by day, by week, it depends on what you stipulate. But there are in long-term rentals, our company does do the management. For short-term rentals, there are other companies we can suggest, and usually they take about 30% profit, give or take. It's a short-term rental.
Okay. So then when renting, they're talking about horror stories. So they're asking, is there horror stories that you have, or do you find that you usually get good renters? I know that Alan and I are excellent renters.
I can't complain. We actually can't complain about our renters in general. We haven't had a problem to the day. Because people are honest enough, and we haven't had any issues. Obviously, apartments can be, there are renters that will call us for every little bit of things. There are others that won't call us at all, like Leslie. They won't call us at all. And Alan fixes several little details. But we don't have horror stories. Fortunately, we don't. We don't have anyone that has stopped paying, that has flown away and not told us anything. No. Everyone's very legal binding. They give their prior notice. They fulfill their contracts. Nothing to say. Very serious people, actually saying. Okay.
So then the last question that I have, and then I'm going to have you go through the chat and take questions, if you don't mind. Mm-hmm. Mine is, as you think of all the people that you've worked with from the U.S. and all that you've learned with working with us lovely U.S. people, and all of our weird questions and wants and needs, what have they told you that they wish they'd realized before they purchased a home in Madeira? Any unexpected expenses, issues, just something, anything that you would give as a word of advice that people struggle with?
So I actually would say that sometimes the feedback I get from clients is that we speak differently certain terms that you're used to in the States that's quite different in interpretation here. And sometimes when we start the searches, we're not compatible yet because we're not speaking the same terms. Okay, so that's something we've worked on. As for closing costs, I don't feel that people, at least the ones that have worked with us, okay, have not said to us anything that we feel. But what I have come through the years I've been working in this, I've talked to a lot of people that didn't directly work with us, and some of them bought without ever living here. So they didn't do the rental first, they purchased without stepping their foot on the island, or on the quick scouting trip, and that's not enough. Others, what I feel, and that comes when you come on your scouting trip, I think you need to be here at least 2 weeks. 2 weeks to scout calmly. That's something that's happened to 1 or 2 clients of us. They come like a week or 4 days, and it's all a rush, and they don't get a feel of the island. So the timing.
And breaking them up, meaning schedule your scouting trip, on Monday, and then that way Claudia and Susanna would have time, based upon the feedback that they get, to find other properties where they missed a beat. If it's scheduled for Monday, Tuesday, back to back, they're going to have chosen and pre-scheduled that in advance. So by having it Monday and Wednesday, Monday and Thursday, that kind of thing, then they have time to react properly.
We need a bit more time because our system is different than the States, and that's something that I'd like to talk about. We depend on other realtors to open up the doors to the majority of properties. That means we have to combine schedules. If you're coming just for 3 days and we miss the beat, like Leslie was saying, we don't have time to correct it, or we may not be able to see new things while you're here. So some time gives us more margin to get more in sync with what your needs are and what you actually want.
Yeah. And you don't get to do like in the States where you go see 17 properties in one day. Sorry, guys. It just doesn't work.
We've done 7 in one day. We've done 7.
Which was a major feat, I'm sure.
It was. We've done 7.
I bought a house after 17 in one day. It was easier. Yeah.
That was because of exhaustion. You just
I did. I laid on the floor in the middle of the house and finally said, this is it. I'm not looking at another house. Perfect. Anyway, so if you will go ahead and jump into the chat.
Okay. Okay. So the first questions come about the mortgage percentage, and I think I've already talked about that, but in average, it's about 4.5% at the moment, okay? So it's lower than in the States at the moment, obviously, because yours, I believe, is at 11, 10, 11, no?
I didn't even look.
Yeah,
We'll
but here it's lower. In Europe, it's lower. But at the moment here in Portugal, it's around 4.5% if you're doing the Euribor at 12 months, okay? Mortgage payments are deductible, we've already answered, so they're not deductible. Mortgage or rentals, just small amounts. Rentals can be deducted, mortgage, no. Home insurance, we already talked about. Also, the primary residence we've already talked about. So even if you don't move straight away, you just have to consider that if you nominate something as your primary residence, you're going to be tax deducted first. Then we have a question from David about how long are most rentals. Long-term rentals, by default, the law states they should be 1 year, okay? So usually they're 1-year contracts. And it's actually one of the compliances for you to apply for the D7. You have to have a 1-year contract, at least. What are the typical months to be paid? Depends on the property. Typically, it will be 1 month's rent and 2 months security deposit, which will be given to you at the end of the contract, as long as the inspection determines that the property is in good shape, okay?
And what about pet deposit?
What we have experienced lately is that some owners ask for 1 more deposit. So instead of 2, they ask for 3.
Okay, because of the pet.
Because there's a pet.
And that would be returned at the end?
That will also be returned at the end. All security.
As long as everything's good, okay.
Unless it's agreed upon in the beginning that it won't be given back. However, in our experience, all security deposits are given back pending the inspection.
Okay.
Okay. Have they suspended ALs? They haven't suspended it. However, if you are to buy an apartment with that intention, you are at risk at the moment, because condominiums, so the people that live in a condo, can do a meeting and determine that they won't allow AL. So if AL really is the way to go, you have to either buy an apartment in a building that already has that approval, and that can be asked before you purchase, okay? Or a house, and that way no one can say anything to you.
Okay.
That's the best and safest way, because apartments at the moment for AL, it's complicated. It's risky.
Remember, life is short. We should have done this sooner. Let us know what we can help you with. Pre-signups are open for the new Live Abroad program on our website. Our vendors and affiliate links are how we support this channel. They are located in the description of our videos, as well as our website and Patreon. We'd like to take a moment to thank all of our Patreon supporters. Your financial support is truly appreciated, allowing us to create new content. We hope you continue to come along with us on our new adventure. The next stage in your life is a journey.